Hello everybody, Mr. Hasty here. Today we're going to start our chapter on sound. The first section discusses what is the nature of sound, which really means what is sound. And that's somewhat of a complicated question. So, first of all, things we do know about sound. Sound is created by vibration. So when you hear a guitar string, or a car horn, that has vibrated, and it has vibrated and created a longitudinal wave in the air. That longitudinal wave is what we hear. Now, you can't just say that it's waves we hear, because not all vibrational waves are audible to humans. There are some that are in frequencies so high or so low that we can't hear them, but other animals can. But then there are frequencies that are so high or low that we're not even sure if they're perceivable by any creature. So we do know that sound is created by vibration. If we have a guitar string and we pluck it so it vibrates, creates that standing wave, it's going to create air pressure changes, and those air pressure changes are what we hear. And the medium for most sound waves, as we consider them, is air. If that takes vibration, then how do we make sound? Well, humans and many other animals have vocal cords or other mechanisms in our body that will vibrate. In your throat, you have bands of tissue that will vibrate to create the sounds that you want. Now, usually when we talk about sound, we're talking about sound moving through air. But sound can move in other mediums, and we know this. When you're underneath water, you can hear sounds outside of the water. We talked about how those sounds get garbled because as the sound wave comes in, it gets bent. That concept is called refraction, which we talked about before. And so the sound wave we hear underwater doesn't sound like the sound wave we hear in air. So, sound can travel through liquids. Sound can also travel through solids. So, if you've ever put your ear up to a door, there's waves coming through the air, then they go through the door, and we can perceive them on the other side as sound. So remember, each different material is called a different medium for the sound. Now, sound has a speed. It travels at a speed. The speed that is commonly listed for the speed of sound is about 340 meters per second. So, just to be clear, this is the speed of sound in air at about 20 degrees Celsius. Now, if you were to cool the air down to 0 degrees Celsius, it would travel at 330 meters per second. Now, if you cool the air down even further, it'll travel even slower. The speed of sound in water at 20 degrees Celsius is about 1,500 meters per second. So that's the speed in water at 20 degrees Celsius. So one thing that's interesting about this from a biological standpoint is this means that you have further sound traveling in ocean environments, which means that the perception of animals in ocean environments probably is very different from ours because of the speed of sound in that environment. And so typically what's true is the denser the material. So let's remember density. Density is how much mass per volume there is. So gases tend to be the least dense, liquids tend to be middle, and then solids oftentimes are more dense than liquids. If it's a solid that floats, well, that's different, but if it's a solid that sinks, it's more dense than the liquid. For instance, steel is 5,800 meters per second for the speed of sound. So it travels incredibly fast in steel. So the more dense something is, as density goes up, speed goes up. And the reason for this is density can be thought about how tightly packed the particles are. So if we have a very loose set of particles, and the vibration means that we have to have those particles collide, it takes more time for particles to collide in this situation. If they're tightly packed, they're going to all shift pretty much at once. So as you push this side's going to move. It's going to be a much faster transfer of the wave. So let's talk about how we hear. We're going to get a little bit into biology here. So how we hear, we have a diagram of the ear here. So the ear is broken up into three parts biologically. The first part is called the outer ear, and it's pretty much everything from the outside of your ear till you hit this part, the tympanic membrane, also known as the eardrum. Then we have the middle ear, that's everything in here, in that region right there. And then we have the inner ear, which is everything over here. So they just break it up so they can talk about different parts of it. So we're going to talk about a sound wave traveling into your ear and what happens. So your ear is specifically shaped to help funnel sound waves into your ear canal. And it's specifically designed to do that because if the wave gets in there cleanly, it makes for a better sensory experience. Now, those waves are going to vibrate your eardrum. Your eardrum is a tough membrane. Membrane is just like a, kind of think of it as a drum head. To vibrate sounds into your middle ear. Now, basically the purpose of it is protective. Not only does it help us transfer the sounds into the middle ear, but it also helps kind of shield us. It's a tough membrane to kind of prevent things from getting in there, prevent things from getting into our inner ear where they could create infections and problems. So it kind of serves a double purpose there besides just allowing the vibrations to occur. So once you get into the middle ear, you run into three little bones, which are called the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. Now, they actually have Latin names called the malleus, incus, and stapes. But we'll just call them the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. So what those do is they actually serve as levers to amplify the signal. As the wave vibrates your eardrum, the hammer, anvil, and stapes actually serve as a lever system to amplify the sound into your inner ear. Now the stirrup is connected to the inner ear region directly, and the hammer is directly connected to the tympanic membrane or eardrum. Now, once it transfers that, once it amplifies the signal into the inner ear, it goes to something called the cochlea. Now, the cochlea is a spiral shaped structure with liquid and tiny hairs. And this serves as our sensory system. So the wave vibrates into there, and then it moves these little hairs in a liquid medium, and those little hairs send nerve impulses to our brain, and that's how we perceive sound. So real quick recap. Sound wave comes in, hits that tympanic membrane, that eardrum. The eardrum vibrates the hammer into the anvil, into the stirrup to magnify the signal, then travels through the liquid region of the cochlea, and these little hairs in here serve as sensors to send nerve impulses to our brain. And that's how we perceive sound. Most hearing loss occurs in the inner ear when damage occurs to the cochlea. And so modern science, modern medicine is finding ways to work around with things called cochlear implants and things like that. But that's the source of a lot of hearing loss, is damage to those cochlea. Now, just as a point of kind of humor to me, there's a famous expression that says, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Well, what we do know is that if a tree would fall and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. We do know that if a tree falls in the forest, it's going to create waves of vibration. The next question is, does someone have to perceive those vibrations in order for it to be called sound? I guess that's like kind of the point of the question. Well, that covers everything we're going to discuss today. See you next time.